and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 505, and today's date is October 30th, 2014, and the title of this episode is U.S. State Department warns that Americans in the Middle East might be attacked by Al-Qaeda-aligned insurgents. We're going to get right into the economic collapse news, and as we know, the stock market was pushed and pumped up high. The S&P, the NASDAQ, the Dow, all making great gains, and then all of a sudden we see gold. Gold has been smacked down, brought below the 1200 mark, then it went above the 1200 mark, and it looks like there were a lot of paper contracts being thrown at gold all at once to bring the price down. Of course, this is all part of the illusion to keep it alive, that the economy is recovering, that everything is fine. The Fed is ending QE and C. It makes no difference, but sooner or later what's going to happen is this whole entire market's going to start to crash. People are going to start to realize that, hey, this is not real anymore, and what is keeping the market up so high? It's not corporation earnings, it's not, people getting jobs or good paying jobs. What is keeping this up so high? And we're going to see it's the plunge protection, the high frequency trading, and everything else that they can throw into it to keep this market alive. And again, the stock market is the last indicator of a fallen economy. When we go back to 1929, we had the economy struggling, failing, decreasing, until the market finally crashed. So it wasn't really the market that brought down everything, it was everything before that time. We see Europe right now, they are in a recession/depression. Things are not getting better over there, even though they're trying to convince us that things eventually will get better. No, they won't. There is no way out of it right now except for some type of an event. Now we see initial jobless claims. Their average nears about a 40-year low, and we have to remember those people who are being laid off in retail, and we're knowing that there's thousands of people being laid off, stores are closing. If they don't meet the parameters of working a certain number of hours, getting paid a certain a dollar amount per week, they cannot claim unemployment insurance. So they're completely left out, and they don't count. But what we're seeing is continuous claims are starting to increase right now and not fall. And we see more and more companies are laying off. Target, 80 people are being let go in their property management division. Verizon is closing their call center. About 117 jobs are going to be lost there. Pottsville Rubbermaid plant layoffs are going to begin in December. Update, Microsoft, 3,000 latest rounds of cuts. So we can see right now a lot of these people have very good, well-paying jobs. They're going to be let go, and they're going to be coming into this job market where mostly it's part-time. And they're going to find this out very, very quickly. Once they start sending out resumes, they get no response, and they're going to start to panic. They're going to take the part-time jobs. And again, this holiday season is not going to go over that well because, again, they're worried about rent or mortgages. They're worrying about food, clothing their children, and the last thing on their mind is to go out and buy a large HD TV. Now we see the third quarter GDP. Wow, incredible. It's up 3.5%. Everything just bounced back. Everything is fine. We just had that one bad quarter in the winter time, and everything is fine right now. But despite the sharp slowdown in consumption with consumers, how did this GDP reach 3.5%? And if we look at this and we drill down, we find out, well, it wasn't the U.S. consumers. No way, no how. It was government. They stepped in, and they stepped in hard. With its 0.83% boost to the bottom line GDP, the highest since the second quarter of 2009, what did they do? Well, the U.S. National Defense spent about $30 billion. It was the most since 2008. And of course, this has to do with the Islamic State, what's going on in Iraq and Syria. And this was their way of pushing GDP as high as it is right now. Now, if you strip all that away, guess what? GDP implodes, and it doesn't look good for the real economy here in the United States. Now, what's very interesting is that there is an article in Business Insider where the headline says, cash-strapped Americans are an ominous threat to retailers. So again, they have the word threat in there. So cash-strapped Americans. You mean people who can't find good-paying jobs, so they don't have the discretionary funds to, pay for this merchandise. And we're starting to see that Walmart, JCPenney, Target, Macy's, Family Dollar, and many other retailers are starting to realize that, something, the low income and middle class, they're having a very rough time. They don't have money right now. Executives at these retailers say that Americans are increasingly unwilling to spend money on discretionary items despite modest gains in the job market. Now, we know what the gains are in the job market. They are all part-time, low-paying jobs. These are not full-time, great-paying jobs. And again, those people who are still looking, they are not counted. And this is why we're seeing this 5.9% rate of unemployment. But when we look out there and we look at the real calculation, it's closer to 30%. Macy's CEO Terry Lundgren, the consumer has not bounced back with the confidence that we are all looking for. The low-end consumer has not benefited in this recovery at all. In fact, I think they have slipped further back, and he is absolutely right. And this is going to hurt retailers all across the country as we approach the holiday season. Even Walmart is acknowledging that its customers are becoming choosier about how they spend their money. Of course, they're going into the store and they're saying, listen, where can I get the most for the amount of money that I have? I'm not going to go buy electronics. I'm not going to go buy expensive clothing. I'm going to look for food and the most inexpensive things I can purchase right now and get the most that I can possibly get. And this is exactly what they're doing. And this is going to be a huge, huge problem. Now, like we said, gold was pushed down. There was heavy volume. And what we're seeing is that someone decided to throw thousands of contracts of gold and silver futures into the market, and it pushed gold way, way down below 1,100 points, $1,100 per ounce at one point. Okay, now it looks like China is making a move. China is going to open bank card clearing to foreign investors. China will open the bank card clearing business to both domestic and foreign investors in an effort to expand the financial sector and optimize consumption. And it also looks like there are 51 countries right now that are going to declare banking secrecy obsolete. And why are they doing this? Well, of course, because of FATCA. Finance ministers from over 51 countries signed an agreement in a step closer to ending the dark financial underworld of tax evasion and money laundering. Basically, what they're saying is the U.S. wants to know what all Americans have out in other banks. Do they have money there? You need to report it because we need as much revenue as we possibly can get coming into the country. And all of you need to turn this information over to the United States government central bankers. Another 30 countries pledged to join by 2018. Asset hideouts like Austria, Switzerland, and the Bahamas didn't sign the agreement itself, but promised to join the initiative by 2018. The new American anti-secrecy measure, FATCA, added a sense of urgency to the debate. FATCA legislation signed into law in 2010 and enacted in July of 1st, 2014, requires overseas financial institutions to identify their American customers to the IRS. The law applies to any account with more than $50,000, and they're going after everyone. And of course, everyone across the world needs to comply with this, or the United States government central bankers will sanction those countries. So they're kind of forced into doing this. Now, it looks like the FBI is looking to pretty much get new powers to hack into computers for surveillance in what is being described by civil liberties groups as extremely invasive and unconstitutional. The proposed change to the rules would enable the FBI to obtain warrants that would apply at any location in the world, giving the agency remote access to tap into computers whose location is being concealed by technology. Some argue that the proposed changes would violate the First Amendment rights to privacy and the Fourth Amendment rights related to searches and seizures. If the rule changes are approved, the FBI would have the power to employ a new range of investigative techniques on computers in America and around the world for any criminal investigation. We are talking about giving the FBI the green light to hack into any computer in the country or around the world. Civil liberties groups and privacy advocates are also concerned that discourse about the changing nature of the FBI's powers is taking place within a relatively obscure setting. And we can see right now that, yes, right now they're trying to get permission, but they already do this. And they're just trying to say, listen, now it is legal that we can do this, and they're trying to get this passed, and they're trying to have the ability to go into any type of system. Now, we know the NSA already has backdoors into many computer systems where they can access all the information. We know they made deals with Yahoo, Google, and Microsoft, and many other companies to give them access, and of course, they paid them a certain amount of money to give them access. And again, this has been ongoing for quite a while now, and this is nothing new. Now, we understand in Ferguson that there might be problems with this indictment hearing, the grand jury ruling. And it looks like Anonymous released the latest in a series of leaks about the grand jury ruling that's coming out. On or about November 10th, the grand jury decision will be announced. Darren Wilson will not be indicted on any charges related to the shooting of Mike Brown. This is what they're saying they retrieved from the data that they got from the grand jury. All local police chiefs and jail commanders have been notified to begin preparing for major civil unrest. Governor Nixon has been notified of the impending grand jury announcement and has ordered the Missouri National Guard to begin preparations for a possible reinstatement of the martial law that was declared at the beginning of the Ferguson protest. So if this information is true and it checks out, and a lot of sources are saying yes, it is, we can see riots going on, and this might spread across the country. And this is exactly what the government is looking for. They tried to do this back when Michael Brown was shot. They had people come in from outside, start creating havoc in that area, even though there were peaceful protests. They tried to gin things up. We saw the military police pointing guns at people that had their hands up, peacefully protesting, and we can see here we are once again, and this is exactly what the government wants, because they would love to declare martial law. They would love to suspend the Constitution, and we're going to have to watch this very, very closely as we move into November. Okay, let's move on to Ebola here. It looks like China now has pledged to donate $82 million to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, the three West African countries worst affected by the Ebola outbreak. It also includes additional aid supplies and medical experts to the affected regions and medical staff of about 160 workers who will help build a treatment center in Liberia. Now, of course, the U.S. sent 4,000 military soldiers to do the same exact thing. U.S. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest had made condescending remarks that the attempts of Russia and China to fight the deadly Ebola disease fade in comparison with U.S. efforts. Both countries have been giving millions of dollars worth of funding. They've been bringing doctors, supplies. The only thing different the United States did was bring in military soldiers. Everyone is chipping in, trying to help in these areas. Now, because China gave $82 million, it looks like the World Bank is pledging $100 million to the Ebola-hit countries, and they're going to give this to the West African countries. Now, it looks like the Lakeland Hazmat Company has secured new orders relating to the fight against the spread of Ebola. Orders have been received from government agencies around the world, as well as other public and private sector customers. And it looks like the orders for their hazmat suits have reached 1 million suits, with additional orders for other products such as like hoods and foot coverings and gloves. And we can see that people are scared. Governments are taking precautions. They're ordering these suits, and something might be on the horizon. We do not know at this point. Now, it seems that Judicial Watch has uncovered a shocking government document outlining the Obama administration's outrageous plan to admit Ebola-infected non-U.S. citizens into the United States for treatment. And again, they have confirmed this story, and Judicial Watch is saying, yes, this is true. On October 17th, Judicial Watch reported that the administration was actively formulating a deal to admit foreign nationals infected with Ebola into the country for treatment. Specifically, the goal is to bring the patients into the country within the first days of diagnosis. Judicial Watch received details of the initiative from the high-level government sources that also disclosed the administration was keeping the Ebola plan secret from Congress. It spells out a plan to rush foreigners into the U.S. for Ebola treatment. It would cost about $300 to treat each patient and another $200,000 for transportation, the State Department memo shows. And of course, the White House is out there trying to combat this, saying, no, that's not what this really is. No, this is crazy. And of course, we know there's always other agendas hooked to this whole thing. Now, there are a couple of questions about Obama's anti-quarantine and his CDC, where they're saying we don't need quarantines. And again, we're told that the incubation period for Ebola is about 21 days, and some people say it's 42 days. But let's go with 21 days. If you've been infected, you could become symptomatic anytime during that 21 days. We're told that only if you're symptomatic, you can infect someone else with Ebola. That's fine. Assuming this is the science, my question for those opposing a 21-day quarantine of travelers from West Africa and healthcare workers who might have been exposed to Ebola is this. What if someone who hasn't been quarantined becomes symptomatic in a taxi cab or a movie theater, at a shopping mall, or in grade school? Suddenly they sneeze, cough, or throw up on someone, and now everyone is infected. What happens then? And this is why, again, today we need to use common sense. If people are sick, or you've been in an area that has an outbreak, you need to think to yourself, do I want to get other people infected, or should I just quarantine myself for a couple days? First of all, what is 21 days anyhow? Let's say it's 10 days and you're still showing no signs whatsoever. I mean, it's not even that long in the grand scheme of things. And you know for a fact, if you are a medical practitioner and you volunteer to go to an outbreak area of this deadly virus, you know there's some risks, and you know that you might get it. So I don't understand this whole talk about this quarantine thing, and there's always an agenda of why they're fighting so hard not to put the travel bans. Now, John Rappaport came out with who benefits, and we can see that some of the responses that I gave before are in here, and here's some other things. Let me read some of these things of who would benefit from this Ebola outbreak. The U.S. government establishes a military outpost in West Africa, which we discussed, the purpose of which is to enhance and expand its operations on the African continent. Its main economic competitor in Africa is China. The CDC and the World Health Organization enhance their influence, justify their budgets to try to appear as the protectors of humanity. Ebola researchers grab new grant monies, seek promotions, enhance status awards. The diagnostic testing industry cashes in. The medical cartel and its government allies move a step closer to being able to mandate all vaccines for the population with no exemptions permitted. The overall toxifying and weakening of a population through vaccines and drugs thus moves forward. Weakening equals easy to control. Selective quarantines further establishes unconstitutional government control over the people. A phony epidemic can trigger the wide declaration of martial law. The Department of Defense and DHS expand their operations because every pandemic is a threat to national security. In the wake of fear of the epidemic, all national health insurance programs on the planet, including Obamacare, can assert more power over the people. We're here to protect you from illness and death, so accept all diagnosis and treatments. No opting out, no resistance. Further attacks can be launched at traditional and natural solutions to illness. How dare people try to treat Ebola with anything except unproven and toxic drugs and vaccines? And they're saying, people won't be able to use like nanosilver to treat Ebola. The killer virus functions as a cover story, concealing the centuries-long campaign to weaken and decimate the population of Africa through starvation, wars, contaminated water supplies, overcrowding, theft of fertile farmland and other natural resources, toxic vaccine campaigns. The war against the epidemic is quite similar to the war against terrorism and involves the same loss of privacy and freedom. And here are other benefits right here that show that there are many agendas along this line of who is going to benefit from all of this. Now, out in Nigeria, as we know, the United States government central bankers are trying to get into this country. They're using Boko Haram, they're using Ebola, they're doing everything they possibly can to have the Nigerian government say, yes, we need your help, please come in here. And right now, as we know, the U.S. government central bankers have cut off like arms supplies to Nigeria. They're cutting funding. They might put sanctions on Nigeria. So Nigeria said, you know what? Forget the United States. We're not letting them in here. We can take care of this, and we're going to look towards, Russia. 1,200 Nigerian soldiers, police, and Department of State services are being trained by Russian special forces. Nigeria has turned to Moscow following an alleged snub or nonchalant attitude of the United States and the United Kingdom towards Nigeria in her fight against Boko Haram. And we can see right now, the United States and the UK, all they wanted was for the Nigerian government to invite them in so they can garrison the country, just like they're doing in Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Congo, Uganda, and they want Mali, and they wanted to do this to Nigeria. So we can see what their real plans are. Now, it looks like China will deploy its first fixed-wing aircraft for Antarctic research in 2015 and is planning an Antarctic airfield. China purchased a Bachelor BT-67 from the U.S., an aircraft used by other countries on the continent. It is capable of flying in temperatures of minus 50 degrees Celsius on transportation, rescue, and research missions. China has plans to build an aviation network in eastern Antarctica to support field research, transportation, and emergency response. So it looks like they're moving into the region as other countries are moving into the region. Now, France is saying that Russia has not met the conditions to receive their ships on November 14th, and I believe the conditions are to remove all their soldiers from Ukraine, back off, stop the fighting. But again, Russia continually is out there saying, listen, we're not involved in this. We're not even involved in the elections. We don't have soldiers there. The OSCE already confirmed this, and the things you're asking us to do is quite impossible since we don't have military assets in the region. So again, this is difficult. Russia has moved a lot of their soldiers from the border of Ukraine that were in Russia, which they're allowed to be, further back to show that, listen, we're moving them back. We're showing that we have nothing to do with this. But again, they do not believe. They're not letting up on the sanctions, and they're continually demonizing. Now, it looks like they're still going on about how Russia has a submarine. Russia is flying military assets around different countries very close, but they're all in international airspace. 2 Royal Air Force jets reportedly threatened to shoot down a Latvian cargo plane rushing at supersonic speeds to intercept it after the plane failed to respond to air traffic controller over Kent in southern England and sent authorities into a panic mode. Yes, the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Media reports mirrored the panic frenzy triggered by the incident, but in a peculiar way, first saying that the cargo plane was Russian and then switching to Russian-made reference because the plane was not Russian whatsoever. And both of these assumptions were completely wrong. the Antonov Design Bureau, the producer of the AN-26 plane, is a Ukrainian company founded in Soviet times, and the plane in question belonged to Latvian registered company. However, the British media seemingly capitalized on the latest NATO reports of unusual increased activity of Russian military aircraft over this area, and they're playing this up just like Sweden was playing up the Russian submarine, and we see that they're doing this to demonize Russia. Plus, there's other agendas to say, see, they're doing this, they're having military operations. Sweden needs to join NATO, which is part of their agenda to get that done. We see that people are getting nervous that Russia is coming, and this is not true whatsoever. The central bankers are doing this to push their war agenda forward, to make sure we all understand who the enemy is going to be. Russia is out there, and they're saying, we are taking no part in preparations for the elections in eastern Ukraine. And we also have to remember that these elections are not going to be recognized by the United States, by Ukraine, by the UN. They're saying this is completely against the Minsk Protocol, and we are not going to recognize this. But I think what's happening here is they're preparing, and when I say they, Ukraine is preparing to go on an offensive move. We see Yatsenyuk is getting prepared. They've been rotating military assets, bringing in military well-trained soldiers, and I believe eventually what's going to happen is they're going to push this forward. Now, it seems Ukraine has come to an agreement with Russia on a price for the gas supplies, and right now they're saying Ukraine is now surviving solely thanks to the gas reserve supplies from Europe. We have maximally increased gas reverse from Slovakia. It's only thanks to the reverse supplies that the country survives and gets heating right now. So we're going to have to see how this moves forward, if they actually make the payment, because Yatsenyuk in the past said, oh yes, we're going to pay it, and they never end up paying anything. But it seems like they've come to an agreement which is meaningless until they actually fork over the money. Now, as we know, in the Middle East right now, things are completely falling apart, and the U.S., France, and other nations are looking to get into Libya, Yemen, Lebanon, to pretty much throw out the new government and put back the puppet governments. And they're going to try everything they possibly can. They're telling us that the Islamic State is in these countries, and now there are new reports coming out saying that these rebel fighters, the people of Libya, are now committing war crimes against their own people in the country. And again, they're doing this with Assad, where they're saying he has committed war crimes against his own people, that he's been using chemical weapons against his own people, and then we come to find out, no, it was the Free Syrian Army. The same thing's happening here. They're doing everything they possibly can to get the UN to look into this region, hopefully to bring in troops to stop the pretty much overtaking of the entire country. And they're doing it right now because they are desperate. They're running out of time. They're going after the oil fields, and once they have taken over the country completely and they start selling the oil, not using the dollar, this is when the problem starts, and this is when the central bankers will move in full force. Now, Iran is looking towards China right now for weapon systems. Faced with the arms embargo enforced by the West, China may be Iran's last hope in upgrading its obsolete weapon systems. And we can see a lot of these countries who are under sanctions are looking towards Russia and China for supplies, for weapons, for technology. And this is continually happening. And again, Syria, Iran, North Korea, these are going to be the enemies as we approach World War III. Now, Syria is out there, and they're scratching their heads saying, why are our airstrikes on the Islamic State positions more efficient than the U.S.-led international coalition? It makes no sense. We're hitting them dead on, and it seems like the United States keeps missing them. Well, we kind of know the answer, and so do they. They realize that they're not really going after the Islamic State. What they're doing is they're destroying the infrastructure there, and they're saying the Syrian Air Force makes about 159 airstrikes a day, while the coalition opportunities are limited to 10 to 15, or even 5 to 7 strikes a day. And what they hit are empty buildings. They hit oil fields, pipelines, refineries, where the Islamic State is not even there. And it makes no sense, and they're realizing, like, maybe they're really not going after the Islamic State. Now, the Islamic State is claiming that they have seized a gas field from the Syrian army, and of course this is exactly what the U.S. coalition wants. They want the Islamic State to take away the oil refineries and different areas and take over cities, so the U.S. can come in and just bomb those areas and destroy the infrastructure. And we can see this is exactly what is going on. Now, Syria is blasting Turkey for allowing Iraqi Kurdish fighters safe passage into Kobani. The first group of Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga fighters has entered the besieged Syrian city of Kobani via a Turkish border crossing. Damascus has accused Turkey of blatantly violating Syria's sovereignty by allowing the fighters to cross through Turkey. And of course, all of this is violating their sovereignty. This bombing that's going on, them prepping for a no-fly zone, trying to place the Free Syrian Army to defend certain areas while they bring in U.S. forces into those areas. And we can see that they are slowly, creepingly maneuvering more and more forces into this area, trying to set up the pretext of why they need the no-fly zone, why they need to go after Assad. Right now, as we know, they have the photos from Caesar on display to show the war crimes. They're trying to build this up as best as they possibly can. Right now, the EU is carrying out the biggest ever cybersecurity exercise. The biggest ever cybersecurity exercise is currently underway in Europe. More than 200 organizations and 400 cybersecurity professionals from 29 European countries are testing their readiness to counter cyber attacks in a day-long simulation. In a Cyber Europe 2014, experts from public and private sectors, including cybersecurity agencies, national computer emergency response teams, ministries, telecoms, energy companies, financial institutions, and internet service providers are testing their procedures and capabilities against a lifelike, large-scale cybersecurity scenario. And again, all this is in preparation for the big one. When the big cyber attack hits, we know they are not going to be prepared for this whatsoever, because this is what they're doing now. If you really think about it, they want them to go through these drills so they can see where the weaknesses are, but not tell them that they're weaknesses, and use this later on to bring down the system. And as we know, here in the U.S., the stock exchange, the NASDAQ, and the BAT system all have kill switches, and they are getting ready for one doomsday cyber attack. And the president even admitted this is what they're preparing for. And of course, we know where it's all coming from. It is not coming from Russia. It is not coming from China. It is coming from inside, from the U.S. government, the central bankers, to cover up this major, major collapse. Now, there is a warning from the United States State Department saying that the U.S. Embassy in Cairo said Americans could come under attack by Al-Qaeda-aligned insurgents. In warning, the State Department's Bureau of Diplomatic Security was said to have determined that the threat against Americans in the Middle East is increasing. They're hearing chatter and all other things. And of course, they are preparing for false flag events to say, the Islamic State has hit our people in different regions. In a statement on October 27th, the U.S. Embassy did not cite any specific threat to Americans in Egypt, but the embassy said it was working with U.S. and Western schools to review and bolster security. They don't know where these hits will occur. They don't know when. Basically, they know nothing, and they are planning for something to happen. And we have to think back. In a couple of reports ago, I reported that the U.S. sent out explosives to many of the embassies around the world, and this is in preparation for a false flag event. And of course, they didn't have to be inspected. They just went through, and they were spread out to all the different embassies around the world. And again, they're going to use this to convince everyone that the Islamic State is hitting the American people in these different areas. Now, there is Spanish intelligence. They have intercepted a plot to weaponize Ebola. Spanish intelligence has intercepted messages passed between jihadists online discussing the weaponization of the deadly Ebola virus for use against the West. The National Secretary of State for Security, in giving evidence to the Spanish Senate, revealed online jihad propagandists had issued an edict to followers to kill Westerners by any means possible. Some of the methods suggested included deadly chemical products from laboratories, poisonous injections, and Ebola as a poisonous weapon. And we can see they are continually prepping for this false flag event. They are building it up. There are lone wolf groups, and we can see there is only one motive and one reason they need to do this, because they need to cover up the economic collapse. Because once they blame this on the Islamic State, we will see other events occur from Russia and China where they will hit the financial institutions and black out some of the cities with cyber attacks on the power infrastructure, because they've been warning about a cyber or virtual 9/11 for a very long time right now. And we can see they've been prepping for this, and they're just waiting for the right time. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.